Okay, so let's move from that into radio chatter, because I believe that McLaren will have a different way of communicating with the drivers going forward, because it was uncomfortable, as I say, that the race engineer and that relationship between driver and race engineer is so important. You know, from when you've run your race team, that if the driver and engineer just don't get along, it's too important for you not to make a change. You either have to change the driver or you change the race engineer. So we know there'll be some changes there, how they communicate. Everyone agrees, brilliant Grand Prix, brilliant victory for Oscar. Max on the radio, you could tell he was not happy with the balance of the car. His race engineer, GP, always sort of good at saying, okay, Max, let's just focus. Keeps a very calm voice. We've discussed this in previous shows that, the race engineer isn't just absolutely. He's not just a vehicle dynamicist. He's a sports psychologist as well.
You need to be with Max because, Max is not any ordinary individual. He's a very, very special guy. Yeah,
strong-minded, great champion. No, and as we saw the race unfold and Max is coming up behind Lewis, having been out of sequence on the tire stops, you could almost sense something was going to happen. And it happened, because guys at that level, they just want the same piece of tarmac. Did you sense that there would be contact? Because it didn't surprise me there was.
David, it was as clear as night follows day. First of all, we've said this a couple of times, which will be good for Lando, if I remember. Don't go in the ring, Lando. Don't go in the ring with Max unless you're well prepared. That's number one. And don't take him on at every corner. Make it stick. Same thing applied here. I believe. I heard Marty Brundle on the thing. I heard you in the situation. I do not hold Max responsible. And anyone who thinks that a world champion, and with the stature and with the style of driving that Max Verstappen has, if you're trying to tell me that he was going to sit behind Lewis Hamilton until the end of the race, well, then I think you're not watching the same race as I'm watching. So it was inevitable as to when it was going to happen, but it was inevitable. Where can it stick? And the only way it really could stick, and what I liked about Lewis, he let it build up, and then he had his best chance on the main pit straight with the DRS, and he moved to the inside of him, which is the perfect place to go. And here's my situation. I'm trying to figure out, who did what to who. And I'm saying that Lewis's front right wheel pitched Max's rear left wheel up into the air. So there's no doubt that Max was ahead. Whether he was going to make the corner or not, we don't know. But the fact is that for me, that is a racing accident. And if he had got a penalty for that, I would have said it would have been very harsh.
Yeah, look, I tend to agree. Max is locked up, so inevitably he's going to continue to keep going straight at that point. Lewis has clear sight of him, so it's not like he's a surprise. He's there. The point at which the contact was made, it wasn't like a torpedo arriving. The move was on, and they were battling. You could see it in the
mirror. He tried to cover it off.
Yeah, exactly. So I do agree. It's a racing incident between two of the great names in this sport.
10 times world champions there in one hit.
Yeah, absolutely. So it just seems to be they're a bit like oil and water, though. They don't mix well. But in fairness to Lewis, I've got to say, you saw him in the pen afterwards, going over to Max, shaking his hand, Max saying, we'll talk about it later. So, I think that's a sincere move by Lewis. It's not lost on him, of course, that he's doing it in front of the world's media, being seen to be, magnanimous, I think is the correct word. But at the end of the day, Lewis is a more gentle, steely racing driver, where Max is a more physical, steely racing driver, and it's quite interesting, isn't it, the contrasting ways that they go about their winning.
My question to you, David, I'm now the boss and I'm listening to Max on the phone, talking to his engineer, and that's also uncomfortable. I didn't like some of that, and he was tetchy all the weekend. I don't subscribe to this business of doing simulator racing till 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't like it. But what a driver does after he goes home after qualifying and finishes is his business and not really anyone else's, unless they're doing something ridiculously stupid. However, my guess is, just let me talk me through this, because you're very close to all of these people. Max drives for Christian. And Toto has made it very clear that he wants and will get Max into Mercedes, if not by 26 and hopefully by 25. Now run that through my mind. When people and when drivers make those kind of comments, I have to think the conspiracy inside my head tells me, oi, is this something that's unfolding? Now, it's probably not. And I would imagine that it's completely and utterly cover wash and stuff like that. But nevertheless, it did go through my mind. Is Max, because we clearly know that Max's father and Christian don't get on, and a lot of this revolves around Helmut Marko. So where do you see Max next year? Oh, sorry, in 26, first of all.
26. Well, I've not personally had sight of the contracts, but if I believe the sort of paddock rumour, then he has a contract. He'll be in Red Bull. And I think as long as the car and the team give him a belief that he can battle for Grand Prix victories, I don't see that changing. I think he's comfortable there. I think he's happy there. And as we've seen with Lewis, just because you decide to go somewhere else doesn't mean that you're going somewhere better. You know, at the moment he made the decision to go to Ferrari, Ferrari were stronger than Mercedes. Right now, Mercedes, you know, they've scored more points up until the weekend in the previous 5 races than any other team. So they've been doing a good job. Brilliant comeback from a difficult start to the year. So you're really rolling the dice of where the future performance will be. The only time, and you know this as well as I, that when teams are winning, that everybody's looking at each other, nodding, going, "How great are we? We've achieved our technical targets." And then that same team, whether it be Red Bull after the Vettel years, who the focus was on the engine, saying the engine wasn't performing. You know, it's always easy to sort of point a finger at something outside of your own control. I remember at McLaren, if we ever had any issues, Ron was quite comfortable for it to say it was the issue with the Mercedes because he didn't build the Mercedes engine. So within these marriages of convenience, there's always a little bit of finger pointing. But when off the back of success comes lack of success, and then everyone starts looking at each other going, well, I was part of a winning team. Which one of you is getting it wrong now? You know, it's quite difficult for somebody to put their hand up and go, I got the numbers wrong. You know, so it's a massively complicated sport, which leads to the fact that it's got such a fan base because we're always trying to understand how things have, you know, turned out the way they turn. But
my conspiracy to David, don't stay on that fence too long. I need to know what your answer is on the Max situation, because you've told us what you think he's going to do. Yeah. What could he do?
Well, he could go to Mercedes. Of course he could. He can't go to Ferrari for the next 2 years unless Charles gets fired or Lewis gets fired or they walk away because they have firm contracts. So logically, that only leaves a move to Mercedes, and Toto has been very open as his style of management has always been to say, yeah, he's a target. He's a Grand Prix winner. McLaren have 2 brilliant drivers that are, in my mind, number ones, which will become complicated for the team when they consistently are delivering that. So yeah, I see Max staying at Red Bull, but Mercedes could be somewhere he could move to.
So just to finish on that, we mustn't lose sight of the fact that in Monaco there was a meeting between Toto, Jim Radcliffe of Ineos, who is the Man United guy as well, you know, and then Cardenas, who is your friend, who is the chief executive of Mercedes. And together they put together a fighting fund to cover off the possibility of a salary requirement to cover for Max. And Max was aware of it. I'm not actually sure he was at the meeting, but he certainly was aware of it, and it was designed and created. Surely that gives some indication about the steely commitment by Toto and his team to actually get Max on board at some stage. So we shouldn't be surprised to see Max in a Mercedes car in the next years.
Yeah, well, look, Max is probably the highest earning driver in Formula One. Maybe that'll swing to Lewis at Ferrari. I don't know. I don't have sight of that. But it's not all about the money. It's about the performance. So you can put together a fighting fund, but all that money that's being spent on the driver isn't being spent on the car. So I think you would have this battle in your own mind where you get a budget and you're trying to allocate as much into R&D, but to get the best drivers, you're having to pay a lot as well. So let me ask you the question. How did you play that out? And I totally expect and respect the fact that you weren't dealing with the sort of budgets that a Mercedes would have or a Red Bull would have.
The one that comes to mind very clearly, the drivers for me, do I think anyone got more than a couple of million at that stage? We're talking about, 2000, 25 years, 30 years ago now. So that was the kind of money. And then when Damon came, his demand was ridiculous by my standards. And I said, listen, Benson and Hedges, it's very simple. You want him for publicity. You want him because he's British. You want him because he's a world champion. That's fine. But he would not be my choice based on the money that he's costing. And you either stump up the money or you just let it roll. And they stumped up the money, which I was very glad about because I didn't have to pay for it.
Okay.